Heroism has been important to all forms of human fiction for as long as we can trace back. Countless classic texts like Greek myths and the like contend with feats of heroism. The Odyssey created the very idea of a standardized hero's journey, and many of the oldest texts that we have to date show off similar character arcs that contend in some way with the idea of heroism. That being said, I want you to think about some of the best examples of heroism to you. What comes to mind? Classic heroes like Heracles, or maybe a more modern example in, say, Ash Williams from The Evil Dead? Or how about a more complicated view of heroism in a character like God of War's Kratos during the Norse saga, where the question of whether or not he is a hero in the first place isn't really so cut and dry? What connects all these examples is that they include some aspect of heroism, and anyone could see that much. But when you take a look at each of them, there are clear differences in how their heroism manifests itself with each example. Now, indulge me a little further. Are some of these examples more heroic than others? Is that possible at all? Does it even matter? In a previous video, I questioned the characteristics of a hero through the Dragon Ball character Gohan, and honestly, I believe I was far too harsh in that video, so I wanted to take another look at the idea of heroism from another angle and appreciate what it can offer a story through the different ways that heroism manifests itself. I believe that the examples I've gathered show off some of the best different sides of heroism represented in modern fiction. Are these the end-all be-all best examples of what a hero can be, or the best written examples of their archetype? No, certainly not. But these stuck out to me as some important examples in the modern zeitgeist that highlights some different ways that being a hero can show itself. Also, as a quick disclaimer, since we've talked about Spider-Man and what makes him such a great hero previously on the channel, I won't belabor the point by repeating myself, but you can assume that I think he also fits alongside the following examples as one of the best written heroes in modern fiction. The first kind of heroism that I want to talk about, and my personal favorite, is the vulnerable hero, and the character that I'll be choosing to represent this form of heroism is Deku. Hailing from the universally superpowered world of My Hero Academia, Izuku Midoriya, aka Deku, captured the hearts of countless anime fans upon the release of Season 1. And alongside its second episode, he went on to show the world exactly what kind of hero he is. In the world of My Hero Academia, approximately 80% of the population has some sort of quirk, or, effectively, a random superpower that they develop as a child. As you can imagine, in a society like this, that 20% can feel incredibly left out, especially as children, having to see the amazing things that their peers are able to do. Our main character, Izuku Midoriya, grew up fantasizing about becoming a professional hero, a natural profession that arose as a result of this superpowered society. Growing up, he idolized the #1 ranked hero, All Might. As the #1 hero, and someone who carefully molded his public image to create a symbol of peace, All Might acts as the glue that holds hero society together. Having a clearly defined top hero with unshakable morals and who can right any wrong he comes across is what other heroes, professional or prospective, strive to be, so it's really no surprise that he's Midoriya and practically everybody's favorite. Although, one thing stands in Midoriya's way of becoming a professional hero. He resides in the 20% of society born without a quirk. Finding this out as a child utterly devastated him. He had dreamed of becoming a hero all his life, and to watch it crumble before him was just too much for his young self. Without powers, there's simply no hope of him becoming a pro hero. It's never been done before. Through his childhood, Midoriya was bullied by his classmates for being quirkless, mainly by a kid who would go on to become his rival and friend later in life, Katsuki Bakugo. Being bullied for having no quirk was probably super common in this world, and as you can imagine, bullying, in a world where 80% of people manifest superpowers by the age of 4, is far harsher than it is in our world. Especially when the bully in question can blow up his sweat on command and is completely psychotic. When the story picks up in episode 1, Midoriya and his classmates are about to graduate from junior high, and Midoriya still has his sights set on becoming a pro hero, despite having no powers, which normally would rule him out from consideration. Despite that fact being clear from the start, he is still determined to follow his dreams. Although his life flashes before his eyes when on the way home from school he's attacked by a superpowered villain, whose powers effectively make him a giant sludge monster. Miraculously, All Might shows up and defeats the villain, saving Midoriya in a single attack. Upon waking up after the incident, he sees that All Might remained by his side to confirm that he was okay following the attack. Once he does so, confirming that Midoriya is okay, he jumps off to the next crime scene. Midoriya, the little psycho that he is, has an important question to ask All Might, and most likely won't ever get the chance to meet him again face to face. So as All Might jumps off the roof, Midoriya grabs a hold of his leg to follow him through the air, very nearly dying just to get the chance to speak with All Might. Upon landing, he asks All Might if he can still be a hero even though he has no quirk. If anyone would be able to lift his spirits back up and reaffirm his dream of becoming a quirkless pro hero, it would be the #1 hero, the symbol of peace himself. Though, unfortunately for Midoriya, All Might tells him the truth. In this world, someone with no powers simply can't be a hero. It's just not possible. After this quick conversation, All Might falls out of his muscly, powered-up form, and what's left behind is a skinny, fatally injured man. He confides in Midoriya that he was deathly injured by a villain he fought years prior, shattering Midoriya's lifelong view of the symbol of peace even further after his refusal to feed into the young boy's delusions. Coincidentally, at this moment, Bakugo is attacked by the same sludge villain from earlier who escaped All Might's captivity during his and Midoriya's conversation. The two of them chase the villain down, seeing other pro heroes trying and failing to defeat him and save Bakugo. All Might, having fallen out of his powered-up state and with no energy left to reignite it, is in no position to help. Midoriya sees this scene playing out, and the following moment fully captures exactly the type of heroism that Midoriya portrays. Despite having no powers, despite being told that he can never become a pro hero, and despite the victim ruthlessly bullying him throughout his entire childhood, without thought, Midoriya jumps into action. His body moves before he can consider the implications of this action, and he runs in to try and save Bakugo. Of course, several pro heroes couldn't defeat the villain, so Midoriya's efforts are to no avail, but his bravery and sheer force of will to run into certain danger in the name of saving others inspires All Might to gather his strength once more and power up back to his muscle-bound form and put an end to the villain, saving the day. Midoriya did not save Bakugo on his own. The villain had powers and he doesn't, and he didn't even have so much as a weapon to fight him off with. So realistically, he was never going to beat him on his own. While he has the heart of a hero, in a world like this you simply need powers to compete as a pro hero, but Midoriya may have just stumbled upon his way into hero society. All Might reveals to Midoriya that he has a way to transfer his quirk over to another, and upon seeing the display of heroism that Midoriya showed by running in to save Bakugo, All Might knew in this moment that Midoriya was the right one to succeed him as the next user of his quirk, One for All. Something important to note is that the hero name that he chooses for himself is Deku. This word was used by Bakugo when bullying him as they were growing up, the insult roughly translating to good for nothing or describing a useless person. But when Deku chooses this to be his name, it's derived from the word Dekiru, which means you can do it, going to show the relentless optimism that permeates his brand of heroism. Deku will push through whatever obstacle he may face in the name of justice. Another moment similar to this crops up at the end of the manga during the final fight of the series, Deku's showdown against Tomura Shigaraki. By this point, Shigaraki had gained the quirk All for One, the polar opposite of Deku's One for All, allowing him to absorb and redistribute quirks between individuals. Deku has fully awakened One for All, allowing him to access all the different superpowers hidden within it, and also letting him converse with the lingering consciousness of the users associated with each one. Deku, as a true hero, doesn't want to kill Shigaraki, even though he realistically could. He intends to reach Shigaraki and try to convince him to be better. His plan to do this? Allow Shigaraki to take different quirks from One for All so that the consciousness of the users associated with them can break down his defenses. allowing for Deku to reach him with one last outstretched hand. Poetically, during this encounter, in allowing his quirk to be transferred over to Shigaraki, Deku is progressively left with less and less abilities to push him through to that last attack, to the point where, when it's time for his final rush to deliver that last blow and fully transfer One For all that he has left is a fraction of the strength that One For All granted him, and the tenacity that led him to try and save Bakugo all the way back in episode 2. And just like in that moment, Deku's powers are not what makes him a hero. It's his natural drive to do what's right, to help the helpless no matter what. So he leaps into action without powers and without a second thought, just like before. Deku manages to reach Shigaraki, and while it may have been too late for the villain, Deku successfully transferred all of the quirks over to him, overloading and destroying his body, ultimately saving the world. It's fitting that Deku's final push includes an unwavering determination to give up all his powers in order to save the world. They were never what made him special. It's what tipped off All Might that Deku was worthy of the powers in the first place that made him special. His willingness to throw himself into danger to save another, the heroic drive that just can't be quelled. He is a hero because no matter the cost, powers or not, he will try his best to save anyone who needs saving. That's what makes Deku a hero. Not the powers he was granted, but the heart that earned them. Other examples of this vulnerable hero archetype that I would like to include are Samwise Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings. Samwise is one of the purest examples of bravery in the modern media landscape. He isn't particularly skilled with a blade, he isn't very strong, nor is he even in shape. But when it comes down to it, he's willing to do what nobody else can and saves the day despite his physical mediocrity. Another example, this time on the more realistic note, I would consider Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird a vulnerable hero. If you're not familiar, he's an attorney charged with defending Tom Robinson, a black man who, given the facts presented in the case, is clearly falsely accused of committing a horrible crime. Atticus Finch, despite being able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Tom could not have committed the crime he was accused of, also could not stop him from being convicted. Eventually, Tom was killed while trying to escape prison. Atticus Finch is an example of a failed vulnerable hero, the dark side that can come with this archetype. He clearly showed heroic traits, and similarly to these other examples, he was powerless to do anything about it. But unlike them, his determination to do what's right did not end up being enough, and he failed. This is the potential price of being a vulnerable hero, and sets in a realistic standpoint to view the successful ones from. Next up is the benevolent hero, and the character I'm choosing to represent this form of heroism is Luke Skywalker. From a galaxy far, far away, Luke Skywalker grew up as a moisture farmer on the Outer Rim, in the crime-ridden desert planet of Tatooine. Growing up, Luke would always yearn for more, staring out into the skyline and wondering what he could make of himself if given the chance. Well, one day, that chance found him instead. After acquiring a droid trusted with a message from one Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker's journey to greatness began. Throughout the entirety of Episode 4, Luke acts like a spoiled, whiny kid, which makes for a relatively unlikable main character, especially given that this was audience's first exposure to him at the time. But what it ultimately does is lay a solid groundwork of flaws for Luke to work through over the films. And for that reason, I think it's very clear that him being annoying and whiny was on purpose. He treats this first outing like some sort of fun adventure, not seeming to realize that he's placed himself right in the middle of a war. And no moment makes this more evident than the death of Obi-Wan Kenobi. As I said before, up to now, Luke, while having some sense of agency throughout this movie, ultimately still acts like a child throughout most of it. He's motivated by wanting to save a princess and get cool magic abilities that becoming a Jedi can bestow upon him. But right before they leave the Death Star, he's made to watch his mentor die right before him, and he's powerless to do anything about it. This moment gives him a sense of urgency, purpose, and responsibility. And for the rest of the film, there's a fire lit under him. This moment is the origin of Luke Skywalker's sense of justice and heroism, which will be expanded upon in future films as he grows between the runtime and untold battles in between. At the beginning of Episode 5, Luke Skywalker is shown to have gotten far more experience under his belt than where we left him. It's clear that, while it hasn't been very long since the previous movie, he's had to step up to the plate and take this war seriously. The opening scene makes it clear that he can use the Force to some sort of consistency, and has seen a few battles to bolster his previously lackluster combat experience. This isn't to say that Luke has somehow shed all his flaws between films though. It's made very clear that he still has a lot to work through, especially when he's easily captured by and almost killed by the Wampa early on. The beginning of this movie shows a character still in the early stages of his journey towards becoming a Jedi, and the hero we know him as today, which is a lot of progress since the previous film, as when that one began, he wasn't even ready to begin the journey at all. What the beginning of Episode 5 tells the audience and Luke himself is that he needs a master to guide him. Becoming a Jedi on his own isn't really working out for him. Luckily for Luke, one of the greatest Jedi Masters to ever live still resides in the Dagobah system, and he seeks him out to pick up his Jedi training after his sessions with Obi-Wan were cut short. Luke arrives on Dagobah and is quickly faced with how much he still has to learn. Throughout Empire Strikes Back, Luke struggles with getting a grip on his powers and accepting how far he still has to go before he can call himself a Jedi Knight. This impulsiveness eventually culminates in him leaving Dagobah to confront Darth Vader well before he's ready. While he manages to survive the encounter, it's not without a few battle scars. His hand was lost, and now he has to come to grips with the fact that Darth Vader is in fact Anakin Skywalker, Luke's father. Through all of this, Luke gains a determination to work harder, and after the events of Empire Strikes Back, he commits himself to finishing his Jedi training and putting an end to the Empire. Where we pick back up with Luke at the beginning of Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, he has completed his transformation into a Jedi Knight, and save for one final test, he's finally gained the defining traits required to fully embody the benevolent hero. During his final confrontation with Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine, Luke is resolute in his belief that his father can still be convinced to turn back to the light side of the Force. During the ensuing conflict, Vader taunts him about his sister, threatening to turn her to the dark side given that Luke won't budge. In response, Luke lashes out against his father, almost giving in to the dark side in order to defeat his enemy. But just at the last moment, he's able to right himself on the path he intends to follow, and in the face of his mortal enemy, who cut off his hand, threatened his sister, and killed countless innocent Jedi and citizens alike, he decides to throw down his weapon and leave himself defenseless, trusting in the good still left within his father. And ultimately, he was right to do so. His actions got through to his father, and upon seeing the Emperor torturing his young boy, the humanity within Darth Vader awoke once again, and he returns to the light side of the Force, finishing this fight generations in the making. Luke Skywalker was made to endure a lot during his time in the Rebellion. He was ripped away from his parental figures, saw the death of both remaining Jedi Masters, lost his hand, and had the fate of the galaxy and future of the Jedi thrust upon him at an unfairly young age. But despite all of this, the light that burned within him was brighter than the darkness that tried to overtake him, and while he momentarily faltered along the way, he never once turned to the dark side. This is the most famous kind of heroism, so I'll provide a lot of examples but not expand a whole lot since you kind of get the idea. These heroes represent the best of humanity, with pure hearts that inspire others both in and out of their respective fictional universe. Something about these heroes' sense of right and wrong is just infectious. Some famous examples include Superman, Tanjiro Kamado, and pay attention because I'm being incredibly specific here, the original broadcast's English dub interpretation of Son Goku. The final archetype of heroism that I'd like to represent in this video is the reluctant hero, and the character I'll be choosing to represent it is Katniss Everdeen. From District 12, this young hunter found herself at the 74th annual reaping, where two children between the ages of 12 and 18, one male and one female, are chosen at random to fight to the death in an elaborate arena, as a reminder and repentance of the revolution that the then 13 districts launched against the capital. Katniss decided to enter her name more times into the pool in exchange for earning her family more food to get by. District 12 is a mining village, and being the farthest removed from the glory of the capital, the residents are so dirt poor that many of the children of reaping age have no choice but to use this method to keep their families fed. Coincidentally, it's not Katniss's name that was chosen, but that of her younger sister, Prim, only 12 years old, on her first entry in the reaping. Immediately and without a second thought, Katniss volunteers herself as tribute, overriding the decision for her sister to be put in the ring. This is the first glimmer of defiance against the capital in Katniss. She denies them the satisfaction of her younger sister's death by offering herself instead, and alongside Peeta Mellark, she's shipped off to the games. In the lead-up to the 74th Hunger Games, during an interview with Caesar Flickerman, Peeta announces to the world his love for Katniss, giving them an angle to play to the audience. These are games after all, and what the sponsors really care about is a story. Putting this out there increased their chances of being sent supplies in the arena, greatly increasing their chance of survival. Once the games begin, Katniss initially decides to go it alone, but eventually teams up with a young girl named Rue. Although the arena is brutal, and those within it become like animals, Rue doesn't last long. Katniss is made to hold her in her final moments, her death a grim reminder of how brutal the capital can be, especially in holding these games in the first place. Rue is so young, she may as well have been Prim, Katniss's younger sister. The games continue, and by the end, only Katniss and Peeta are left alive. In the first full-on act of rebellion against the capital, and using the favor they'd gained with the capital's citizens, using their love story as an advantage, they decide to eat poisonous berries at the same moment and deny them a victor. Although they're stopped at the last minute and both are allowed to live, as the first ever games with 2 winners. Katniss and Peeta successfully showed the people of Panem that the capital is not infallible, and in fact, spitting in the face of the capital's right to rule is so easy that 2 teenagers in love had leverage over the ruling class of the land. Maybe, many citizens might have thought, things don't have to be this way. Every 25 years, a quarter quell is held, where special rules are put in place to symbolically represent aspects of the war. For the 25th Hunger Games, as a reminder to the rebels that their children were dying because of their choice to initiate violence, every district was made to hold an election and vote on the tributes that would represent it. For the 50th Hunger Games, as a reminder for the 2 rebels that died for each capital citizen, each district was required to send twice as many tributes. And now, for the 75th Hunger Games, 1 year after Katniss and Peeta's win, as a reminder to the rebels that even the strongest among them cannot overcome the power of the capital, the male and female tributes will be reaped from their existing pool of victors. And so, Katniss and Peeta were once again forced into the arena only a year after their first games. But this time, they aren't going in unprepared like before. The other tributes that Katniss and Peeta allied with before the games, including Peeta himself, had come up with a plan to get them out of the arena and back to the safety of District 13. This whole time, there has been sparks of rebellion slowly catching fire as a result of Katniss's actions in her first Hunger Games. These were further stoked by the tributes of the 75th Hunger Games openly rebelling against the capital in the lead-up to the Quarter Quell. All of this put the citizens in the right mindset to join the rebellion that District 13 has been planning all these years since the initial defeat. And now, with Katniss, the rebellion has the figurehead to make it work. Katniss, once retrieved from the Quarter Quell, is set to be the talking head of the rebellion. She records propaganda to help the rebellion recruit more citizens to their cause, but this just isn't enough for her. She needs to get out in the field, and eventually she convinces them to let her join the front out on the front lines. Katniss puts her life in danger out of a sense of responsibility. She can't sit idly by on the sidelines and watch people die for her cause in her name without putting her money where her mouth is and fighting alongside them. In the end, the rebellion is able to overthrow the capital and replace them as the ruling body of Panem, though they're not quite safe from the tyranny that they fought against. As in the beginning stages of the transition of power, President Coin suggests that they hold a symbolic Hunger Games with children of the capital. Katniss, understanding that if nothing is done, the country will fall under the same order they just spent their whole lives fighting, decides that Coin cannot be allowed to rule. She'll just become another Snow. So during the execution of President Snow, she instead aims her arrow at Coin, killing the would-be tyrant and securing the future of Panem. The reason that I put Katniss in this category of heroism is that she never chose any of this. She volunteered as tribute for her sister, sure, but that was effectively an act of suicide, and she was beside herself anyway, and she never agreed to any of what followed. What's important is, at the end of the day, it isn't whether she chose to become the Mockingjay, but the fact that once the responsibility was put on her shoulders, she rose to the occasion. And not only did she help win the war, but made the right decision and set the country on the right track for rehabilitation afterwards, no matter the personal sacrifice. Other examples of reluctant heroes, who will rise to the occasion despite their willingness to do so, or lack thereof, include Vin from Mistborn, Han Solo, Avatar Aang, and Son Gohan during the Cell Saga. All of these different forms of heroism represent different journeys towards or relationships with power. But at the end of the day, a hero is a hero, and every one of these has influenced people in the real world to do better. And ultimately, that's what it's all about. Whether you're a fan of the endless optimism of the benevolent hero, how the reluctant hero will always manage to rise to the occasion, or the vulnerable hero's determination to do the right thing no matter what, they're all important aspects of the human experience of heroism, and these examples deserve a spot among the greats. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm playing around with making longer content, so let me know if you prefer this or the original shorter type of videos. I absolutely love the idea of heroism, and it's fascinating how many ways it manifests itself in fiction. So this was something I couldn't wait to cover once I had the idea. And you know what? It's just a good excuse to talk about these characters that I love. Next time is an extra special video. I'll be covering one of my favorite characters across all of fiction, the one and only Prince of all Saiyans, Vegeta. So make sure to subscribe for when that goes live. I also want to get into doing reviews of individual games, shows, and movies, so kind of in between major uploads, I'll be ramping up on those as well. Once again, I just want to say that I really appreciate every single one of you for taking the time to watch this video. I always want to make the best videos I can for you, and so I appreciate any criticism you may have, since it'll only make me better in the end. Anyway, that's about all for me today.